We get the Sheriff Sit Down in right now, brought to you by our great friends at our Community Credit Union. Chief Deputy Ryan Spurling, Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning.
Good to see you here, and a couple things to talk with you about. First things first, graduation. Tell me about this. What's happening tomorrow?
We've got one of our new people. Again, we've talked about this before. It takes about a year to a year and a half from the time civil service gets their initial applications to where they provide us with the list, and then we go through an interview process, go through a background, and then if they pass all of that, they have to pass a psychological, a polygraph, and a medical screening. Then we hire them, get them outfitted, start training them. They go to the academy. It's 5.5 months. We have to wait for a seat at the academy, depending upon all the other agencies and when there's an availability. Then they're 5.5 months in the academy, and then they come back to us. They'll sit with a deputy, a field training officer, evaluating and coaching and mentoring them through that process for another 3 months minimum. So we've got one graduating tomorrow from the Criminal Justice Training Center, so he's done with the academy piece starting tomorrow. And we had two in there at the same time. We had Deputy Ogden graduated on the 10th of January, and now Deputy Parsons is going to be graduating, and they'll both be on their field training coaching trip type of thing out on the streets, learning from the experienced deputies, and we're excited to have him back. He's a good kid. He's done a good job at the academy. We always enjoy going up to the academy and seeing all the other agencies, and as the sheriff has said many times, for whatever reason, we've been getting really good quality people that have just been doing a great job up there at the academy.
That's wonderful.
They're finishing really well in the class, score-wise, overall scores. The other piece that was commented on by one of the other sheriffs is that for us, the academy is not a given. Just because you get hired and you get sent to the academy, your life is just beginning. You're up there for months, and you're tested on every single thing you do. And a lot of people don't make it. You don't always make it through the academy, so it's not a given that you've got a job forever. You've got to make it through the academy. You're getting paid while you're there. And our candidates, many of the agencies have people who get partway through or a few days in, and they're done. They don't make it for some reason. And ours have consistently completed the academy too, which is it's a real value to our county because we spent a lot in background and doing everything to get them there. Very, very pleased with all of our folks that are coming in over the last couple of years. And I comment to them all the time that what a neat thing to be able to come into a group of people and be able to say that the people that you're working with are some of the very best in the state, because each one of them have qualified in the top of the state. So we're bringing in some of the best candidates in the state of Washington are right here in Mason County, and they're all getting to work together. And what a great group of people to have.
So are these folks that have grown up in Mason County, or they saw a posting and applied to Mason County?
Not all of them are from around here. Okay. Some of them have. I'm really thrilled to see. For quite a few years, there was a number of people that came through that we grew up in the area, and most of those people have moved on to other agencies, and a few of us are still back, and we had a few in the agency. Recently, we had another guy that grew up here, Jake, and he came back. He was at another agency in Idaho.
He was with Shoshone County Sheriff's Office, and he wanted to come home, he and his wife, so we were able to get him as a lateral deputy, and we're just super excited about having him back on board. I coached him in high school football.
Oh my goodness.
We had Sergeant Petratus, and I started, and Sergeant Petratus is now retired, but Jim went all the way through school here, and Shelton guy went all the way through here, and a number of people that we've had. So
how long of the wait is it currently on to get into the academy?
It's at least a couple months.
Wow.
They're pushing through. I think it was earlier this month they had 10 classes at the same time going through, which is the highest they've ever had. 8 usually is about the max they can do. So they're really bursting at the seams, so to speak, trying to get people trained. You see what's going on with Seattle and other agencies. And with all the scrutiny that law enforcement is facing nowadays, it's getting harder and harder to get people that want to do it.
Mm-hmm. So the waiting time between the initial tests and the backgrounds and those types of things, and then when you go to the academy, what does somebody do in that interim time?
I mean, when they're with our office, once we hire them?
Yeah. So once you hire them, they go through the testing, and then they say, well, we got an opening for you at the academy, but it's going to be in 3 months. What happens in that 3 months or so?
What we like to do is get them exposed to as much as possible.
Sure.
We'll have them go and sit with MACECOM and listen to how the communications officers operate on the radio, so they have an understanding. We have them go and work in our jail for a week. We have them work with our evidence officer for a while. We have them work with different teams to help. For example, both Jesse Ogden and Clayton Parson, who are our new deputies, they were able to help with a lot of our search and rescue missions as well. And they got exposed to that type of stuff. Plus, we're training them on preparing them for the academy, getting them familiar with case law, and then they'll go out and ride with deputies and ask questions. Okay. And a lot of it's just setting them up for success when they go through the academy. We'll send them to the range and get them more familiar with their firearms and different things so that when they're there, they're ready to go.
You're from out of county, just riding around and seeing the geography. It's a lot more difficult than you might think, sometimes even if you grew up here.
Yeah.
Because some of us, if you grew up here and you're going to somebody's residence, you just drive there. You just know how to get there. You don't always know the names of the streets.
Right,
you just know how to get there. And so even when you grow up here, you've got to learn the names of the streets and everywhere.
And the addresses.
When you come in from the outside, when I switched counties and went to another place, I had to learn 3 different full cities, plus the entire county. There's a lot to know out there. Mason County is kind of the opposite of that. There's not as many roads as there is. Like when I worked elsewhere, there was one city that had more roads than there are on Mason County.
Yeah.
Not distance, but more in road names. But when you come to Mason County, you've got to drive into areas that don't necessarily have road names to them, or you've got to go into Olympic National Park and National Forest up there. That's a whole nother setup that you've got to get used to, know how to drive the back roads and where the Forest Service roads interconnect at. The water around here is another an interesting barrier. In some places, you don't have bodies of water that you have to drive all the way around to get it to a mile across something. You got to drive 20 miles around to get there. So there's a lot of interesting obstacles you've got to learn when you're patrolling the county. How to get to the north shore to the south, or you're out in Belfair, how do you get all the way back to Hoodsport? You don't just drive straight across. You got to go all the way down around the south shore. So there's a lot to know.
That's a good point.
The Mason County SWAT team was deployed last week to a call of shots fired. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
It's an interesting thing. Just to give you a little background on our SWAT team, although it's the Mason County Sheriff's Office SWAT team, it's made up of members from other agencies as well. It's not just Mason County Sheriff's Office. Right now, we don't have any Shelton PD people on it, but we're going to again, and we have for many, many years. There were some issues with insurance that we're working through, but we have tribal officers on the team. We have fire department, what are called TEMS, Tactical Emergency Medical people. They're paramedics that have been through SWAT school, so that if there's an injury or something that happens, we've got a paramedic right there.
Wow.
Because many times the fire department has to stage outside of the scene, and that's precious seconds if something were to happen. So we have those tactical medics right on the team. We also have Fish and Wildlife members on the team and others, which is really makes it a diverse and very successful team in that respect, because there's a lot of understanding from different agencies and their involvement as well. We did have a call out on Thursday, and it was shots fired, and we ended up having 2 individuals that were in a room that were secured, and the person that was going after them shot a shotgun at the door, trying to get in to access them, and they ended up getting out the window, and we didn't know it, but after they had gotten out the window, he had gone in, and it appears the investigation is still ongoing, but it appears at this point that it was a self-inflicted gun wound, and we surrounded the place. And a lot of people, they're a little confused as to why we would bring out our military-style vehicles that we got through what's called DRMO, or military surplus. A lot of times you have somebody with a weapon, whether it be a long gun, a shotgun, or a handgun, and they're shooting out into the community. This has to do with being able to protect the citizens of our community, protect the officers as they're going in, and sometimes it just has that overwhelming effect of, I need to surrender.
Yeah.
I need to give up because there's superior firepower in numbers out there. So sometimes that's part of this whole scenario, is to get them to surrender peacefully. And it's what we call tactical de-escalation. If we have everything we need, it starts to de-escalate the scene, because it prevents it from them getting out and going and grabbing a hostage somewhere else, or going into another home. It prevents the situation from getting worse. It secures it, and then we'll deploy robots to try to prevent having to use lethal force. We'll deploy the dogs because we have the canine dogs that are trained with the SWAT team. We'll deploy gas. We do everything we can to try to bring a resolution to the situation at the lowest level possible where people aren't hurt. So that's what all of those tools are for, and it's part of the tactical de-escalation. If we just showed up there with deputies, the deputies only have their handguns and their tools on their weapon or on their belt, the situations often will get worse instead of getting better. So it's part of the whole package. And I know some people disagree with having military type weapon or vehicles and weaponry out there, but it's really what keeps them safe as well.
Sure.
One of those vehicles, I was able to acquire that from the other county that I came from. And when I was over there, that vehicle, a fellow came out that was inside a house and started shooting multiple rounds right into the armored vehicle, which, when the guys tried to make the approach, saved them. What I think about when people want to be critical of that is a number of years ago, we had an individual that we had multiple people down inside of the place, and there was a little girl out on the front porch trying to escape, and the person was going to actively take shots at her, and we were able to intervene with one of our vehicles, go across. One of our guys was able to grab her, get her safely into a vehicle, into one of those armored vehicles to prevent her a little girl from being killed. And so I think that every penny that ever has went into those, just because that one circumstance, was well worth anything we've ever put into it for just that one little kid. So they're a very useful vehicle. We only use them if it's absolutely necessary, but they have served us well in our community.
We wouldn't have been able to get her out because that driveway went right in front of that house. That was in the 2016 in the North End, the quad murder. We would not have been able to get her out because we had to drive right by him on the porch with the weapon if it wasn't for the armored vehicle being able to get her to medical personnel.
Wow.
So, those vehicles have more than well served their purpose since we've had them.
On the Thursday incident, you mentioned that 2 people left out of one of the windows. Was that on their own idea, or are you talking with them, or if you can share that or not, I understand. Are you talking with them, or do you have a line of communication with the active shooter at this point, or when does that
we
get
try to get communication with the person on the inside. I'm not exactly sure how far we want to talk about this, but
he wouldn't answer.
That we try to get a phone into them or talk on their own phone, and communicate with that person as best you can. I'm not sure if they came out, exited that on their own just before we got there.
Well, MASCOM did a great job asking them to get out once they had reported it. Our dispatchers, they just do a fantastic job. They sit in a room. They're not out on the scene with us, but they really do a lot to prepare the scene for us and to get us prepared for it. And they encouraged them to get out, and then our officers on scene, one was still in, said, "Come on out," and then he finally did come out.
Okay. Sure. Also, when people, we obviously sometimes we hear the critical side, the criticism side, but we certainly appreciate the number of people that saw that circumstance and chose to move themselves back without trying to intervene and try to pass through the scene and that kind of stuff, because it's really tough for there's a lot of people involved. Like Ryan says, those dispatchers aren't even on scene, and they're a very critical role for us out there. Everybody that's there is a critical person to that scene, but if we have to stop and deal with somebody, keep walking up to the scene or asking people to step back, or they want to drive between us and who we're dealing with or around us or something, or intervene, it makes it really tough. And I certainly appreciate all the people who are out there that moved back safely, waited patiently. Obviously, we have bus detours, all kinds of things we've got to do in a community, and it's tough when you have to go to a different location and change your whole plan up. But it certainly helps us and the safety of the situation for all those involved, and we have that cooperation.
Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury, Chief Deputy Ryan Spurling here with the Sheriff's Sit Down, presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good to talk with you.